Having everything cleaned out. There, and then. Real estate people coming out.
Saved you lots of spots.
I stuck with this.
You figured this right?
I call to order the meeting of September 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Read.
Here, I can't hear Michelle very well.
Stewart.
Here.
All right, everybody is in attendance tonight. That's awesome. Okay, we move on to consent agenda. Jason to the rescue. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Approval of the minutes from the August 21st, 2023 regular council meeting and special study session, and the study session of August 28th and September 11th, 2023. Item 2, approval of check and electronic payments in the amount of $1,403,565. Item 3, right of way use agreement, 24th Street billboard. Item 4, 902 Kincaid lease agreement, Sound Transit parking garage construction. Item 5, building inspection and plan review services professional services contract. Item 6, purchase and sale agreement, 14211 16th Street East. Item 7, resolution number 1662, carbon credit regional operator subward grant acceptance. Item 8, operations facility early site work package construction contract award. Item 9, Stewart Road Bridge easement agreement, 1096 Butte Avenue. Item 10, 24th Street East utility relocation construction management services amendment.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hochstetter, would you please make a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Newman. It has been moved and seconded. Would any council member like to remove an item off of this list? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. All right. We have no public hearing tonight. Moving on to regular business. No unfinished business. Public comment. I have one signed up. And that would be George Jostin. You can come up.
I don't need to make a comment at this time.
Are you good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out here like to make public comment while we're here
Is this about the Ryan House?
on anything that's not on the agenda?
Oh, okay.
Thank you. All right. Seeing none, we will move on to ordinance number 2871, 2023, 2024 budget amendment Rainier View Park. And we have Chief Financial Officer Cassandra Raymond.
Good evening, everyone. So before you is ordinance 2871.
Can we get a motion, please?
Councilmember Cole, would you like to make a motion?
Yes.
I move that we adopt ordinance 2871, 2023-2024 budget amendment for the Rainier View Park.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Potato. Now I will call on Cassandra Raymond.
So before you, ordinance 2871. This is amending the 2023-2024 biennial budget to support the city's contribution towards the Rainier View Park Covered Court. This is a project that's been in progress for a long time. We are reaching that point. And so this is a project that is partially grant funded by the Washington State RCO, the Recreation and Conservation Office, as well as the local communities program. Mr. Leach will be coming before you later this evening for additional approvals for this project. But this item specifically is to fund the city's portion of the cost for that project. What this amendment does is transfers $340,000 of parks impact fees from our impact fee fund to our parks capital fund. In addition, it transfers $250,000 of YMCA professional services proceeds from our general fund to the parks capital fund in order to fund a portion of this project. Happy to answer any questions. This is the only item on this particular budget amendment. Like I said, Mr. Leach will be coming in a couple of items for further action.
Thank you. Do we have any comments for her? Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the council? Any comments from the public on this? Clerk, please call the roll.
Reed,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Potato,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item B, Rainier View Park Playground Replacement Contract Approval. Councilmember Brown, would you like to make a motion?
I move to consider to execute the contract for the new playground equipment at Rainier View Park.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Deputy Mayor Hochstetter. And now I will call on Community Services Manager Derek Berry.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. Happy to present to you tonight the contract for the Rainier View Park Playground replacement. The park was built in 2006, 2007, so the playground has served its useful life. We're starting to see a little more deterioration, and with that comes increased costs for maintenance. Typically, you get about 15 years if you're lucky out of a playground before you have to replace it. So staff work with several vendors through our purchasing co-ops and narrowed it down to one. We then reached out to the community to help out with selection of the color for the playground. And for you tonight is the contract of $402,000, $402,562.90. So we went through that process with the Forestry and Parks Commission. They narrowed it down. The public helped us with picking the color. We're looking at a timeline of probably February when we would start doing the demolition in-house and doing some site prep for the installation with the hope of having it ready to go around the beginning of May. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The Community Development Department or the Community Development Committee did pass this on 8/23 just last month. So any questions, would love to answer.
All right. Any comments from the public on the Rainier View Park? Any comment from council? Questions for him? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, would you describe the surface?
I would love to. Good question. Jeff, actually, we want to throw some pictures up. I have 3 pictures for you. The surface we have is a little different than our port in place that we have at Loyalty Park. To have this be inclusive, you typically will see like a tile surface or the port in place. A newer thing is actually using AstroTurf. So we're using the improvements we already have from the current setup, and we're getting rid of the walkway between the younger area and the older area. to increase our space for playground. So here you can kind of see the look and feel of the playground. And it actually is a squishy, field turf. So that's the new material. And there's an example of the park itself. We do have dueling zip lines. One is inclusive where, if someone's not able to hold themselves up on the swing, it's one of those molded seats. So people can race back and forth, have fun there. We've got different climbing, we've got several slides and a couple of shade structures. So Forestry and Parks Commission is pretty thrilled with this, and I think the public's gonna love it.
Right.
Is it about the same size as the present
It's a little,
structure?
it's a little bit bigger because we were able to get rid of that little concrete walkway between the two.
Mhm.
With playgrounds, you have to have a safety zone. So if it's 8 feet high, you have to have 12 feet of space.
Oh.
And by getting rid of that, we were able to fill it in a little bit more.
Okay, all right, good.
Member Newman.
Dirk, I just wanted to thank you and the Parks Department about every time we make changes to a park. Things seem to evolve, especially when it comes to inclusivity. But also like a good example of involving the public in decisions. And whatnot. But I wish I were a kid again.
There's some cool stuff for sure.
You were a kid.
That's true.
Okay. Any comments from council on this? Other comments? Are we good? Good online? All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Potato,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Cole. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, item C, Rainier View Park Covered Court. Councilmember Potato, would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute all necessary contract documents with Andy Johnson and Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $1,416,163 for Rainier View Park Covered Court, CIP 18-04, substantially in a form approved by the city attorney.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hochstetter. Okay. I will call on Associate Engineer Andrew Lee.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The item before you is for the construction contract award of the Rainy View Park Covered Court project. This project consists of renovating the basketball court at Rainy View Park. The court will be covered with a new roof to encourage all weather conditions or use in all weather conditions and include ADA upgrades. The court will also be painted to accommodate basketball, volleyball, and pickleball courts. A new Portland Loo bathroom will also be installed near the covered court. As Ms. Raymond mentioned earlier, the city's received grant funding from the local community project program and the Recreation Conservation Office to help fund the project. The city received 4 bids on August 29th, with the lowest responsible bidder being Andy Johnson and Company. The bid amount was for a little over $1,416,000, and the engineer's estimate was a little over $1,544,000. As a side note, I'll also be presenting this project at the city's open house next Tuesday. So I'll have a nice board with some photos of what the project will look like during that night. If you guys want to come look,
Thank you.
be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Go ahead, Cindy.
Mr. Leach, do you have any pictures tonight?
I didn't think to bring any with me, but
Okay.
it's-
Okay, it's just
Yeah.
such a fantastic project. I would like people to be able to see it, so. But hopefully everyone will come to the open house and see what a nice job that's gonna be. It's gonna be, make the park so much more useful year round.
Agreed.
Okay, any comments from the public on the Rainier View Park? Oh, Councilmember Reed. You're not the public, but you're way out.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, I just wanted to reiterate, you started to touch on it just a little bit about the grant funding. I just wanted to point out that my understanding, the majority, if the large majority of the work being done at Rainier View Park was an effort of the staff's relentless pursuit of grant funds through various park-specific programs. And that, and just to reiterate that that's where the majority of that funding is coming from.
Thank you. All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Potato,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Cole. Yes. Brown.
Yes.
All right. Unanimous. Moving on to our last item on the agenda, and that would be resolution number 1663, Ryan House demolition. Councilmember Stewart, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 1663, authorizing the demolition of the Ryan House.
Thank you. Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Seconded by Councilmember Newman. All right. And I call on Carmen Palmer.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Carmen Palmer, your Communications Director. And we'll get the slides up. Thank you, Jeff. I am here tonight to talk to you about Ryan House. I wish this was a different story, but we will go into detail about how we got to where we are tonight. So just a little bit talking about this. This is the backstory, but it is very important to the decision before you tonight. The land that the Ryan House sits on was deeded to the city in 1926. The family asked it to be Lucy V. Ryan Park. The deed talked about allowing the house to stay for at least 5 years with allowable use as a library. There was an amendment in 1979 when the library moved to also allow that house to be used as a museum. The deed is very specific that there are to be no other uses, that there are to be no other buildings built on the site. There's even a clause about no additions to the building. So both deeds were very clear that they wanted it to be a park that is open and accessible to the public routinely.
Sorry, just 1 second. I'm having some AV issues. Getting that up now? The second monitor.
Mayor.
You've spent $3 million.
To the public what's happening while this delays occurring.
We're good. We're just gonna keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about the pause. We had some technical issues for the viewing public
Oh, okay.
because this topic wasn't hard enough already. All right, proceed. Okay. So now hopefully those watching can see the deed and some of the key points. Deed's very specific. It wanted a park use open to the public and accessible, allowed the house to stay for at least 5 years as a library. The 79 deed expanded that use to a historic home or museum, but both doubled down on it needs to be open and accessible to the public. Next slide. How we got here. So this slide, the council saw in 2021. The house was visibly showing some signs of needing some tender loving care. So in 2018, we received a $100,000 grant from Pierce County Lodging Tax to assess the feasibility of a renovation and design ideas for how to better use the space. Again, the deeds wanted them open and accessible to the public routinely. And we did find when we did this study that a lot of the public actually assumed it was a private house and a private yard. So they weren't using it as routinely as the family had originally wished. An architectural historians called ARG, Architectural Resources Group, conducted the study. This was a visual study only. The house was still full of treasures. And so visually, they said, you know, the house is in good shape, gave us some ideas of how to renovate it, technically rehabilitate it, which means you don't renovate it to what it had been. You get it, you put in modern systems, modern electrical, modern plumbing so that it can be used more often while respecting the history. And gave us some ideas for that, for it to continue use as a museum with some expanded uses for traveling exhibits, pop-up retail, discussion groups, you know, pie making classes, that type of thing. So that report came to the council and the council liked it and told staff to continue. We received another $25,000 grant from Pierce County Lodging Tax to also assess how to best use the outdoor spaces and to get a cost estimate for what all of these ideas would cost to actually construct. A pandemic hit, so that actually all happened more in 2021 than in 2020, but we got back on it. This was also part of the comp plan to use the house. And so we came before you, brought you all of these assessments, the cost estimate, the outdoor space plan, the interior plan in 2021, and brought all those before you again. Council asked us to proceed. And the next slide is what happened after that. Most of 2021 and early 2022 was about going out and getting grant funding for this. And it was coming in quite well. The Historical Society cleared out the House of Items. It's a large task that they completed. We started once they were out with the hazardous materials assessment, as you would do in projects like this. We also began an RFQ process to take the concept design into final design to go into construction. As I said, the grants started coming in quite well. Port of Tacoma had a $7,500 grant to add accessibility. Sumner's own lodging tax allocated $125,000 to do this final design work and demolition to get ready for construction. We signed on a different architectural historian company called WJE, who for the final design and into construction. The Pierce County Lodging Tax awarded another $400,000 for this year, and State Heritage Capital Projects, which is a 2-year process, approved $304,000 for construction. So there was a period in about early spring where this project was fully funded and headed into construction. It was a wonderful day or two. And then WJE started giving us reports as they were working on the structural assessment. Remember, the ARG report was a visual assessment, so they didn't open any walls. People were still using the house. People were still in the house. So it was just a visual eyeball assessment that was heavily caveated with you need a full structural assessment when you head into construction. So that's what was being done this spring, and it was not good. Drew will go into more of the details about what was found, or actually what we expected to find and did not find. But it was headed in the wrong direction with needs mounting on top of each other. We started giving updates to the council through the Finance and Personnel Committee. We had to do more hazardous materials abatement. Drew will go into more of that. We could tell this was not headed the right way with needs and funding. And Pierce County Lodging Tax was back in their grant cycle again for 2024 funding. So we actually asked for an additional $750,000, thinking surely that would cover the extra that we were finding. And they approved us, they recommended us for funding, which would be confirmed with the county budget. That continued. The WJE actually needed another $40,000 to $50,000 to complete the structural assessment because it was becoming so in-depth. Sumner Lodging Tax recommended that, and that brings us about to where we are now. We didn't want to bring just another $40,000 to $50,000 before you. It was time to check in with you about the entire project. We actually met with the state. DAHP stands for the Department of Architecture and Historic Preservation, to explore what our options were to try to maybe save a portion if we couldn't afford to save the entire thing. What were our options? And from all of that research, we brought to Finance Committee 4 options. So before we get into those options, I'm going to turn it over to Drew to give you a little more details from the engineering side about the structural issues we were finding.
Good evening, Drew McCarty, engineering specialist. So as Carmen mentioned, we had a couple of additional investigation that needed to happen as far as when it came to structural. The 2 main spots that WJE wanted open was in the cabin in that southwest corner. There's a significant sag and they needed to see, you know, kind of what was going on with the ceiling framing. And then as you can kind of see that top portion right there, those 2 long chunks, that's in the kitchen attic. They needed to see the connection between the wall studs and then the joist framing to see, you know, what was going on in there. Those openings were made. So we had a staff member go in and start pulling down some ceiling boards in the cabin. And he was able to get a couple off and then the rest just completely fell down. He made it out safe and sound though, which is good. But what happened here is that all of those ceiling boards were not connected to the joists at all. So they were just hanging on for dear life. And then what WJE found is that the entire ceiling framing will need to be replaced. In the kitchen, these pictures here show the split studs. This is in the kitchen attic. So what's happening here is you have the joists that are nailed into the studs. And so the entire system is relying on those split pieces of wood. So all of the weight and gravity is just completely pushing on that attic stud walls. The structural engineer then told us at that point that the kitchen attic is completely unusable and nobody should be up there currently. And along with the kitchen itself, no gathering or, you know, many people in the kitchen at once. And then for any work to be done in the kitchen, some kind of structural shoring or system will need to be put into place for any work to be completed in here. Carmen also mentioned that we did an asbestos and lead test. What we found was that there was asbestos in the ceiling tile in the cabin, in the glue dots that were actually holding the ceiling tile up. And then in the Pioneer cabin, in the Victorian farmhouse, underneath the carpet, there was some vinyl tile that had asbestos in there as well. In early June, we had a contractor come in and completely abate those 2 areas. This is something that would need to be done no matter, you know, which direction we went in the Ryan house.
All right. So seeing things like this, that's when we put together the 4 options to bring to the Finance and Personnel Committee. The first was full rehabilitation, just keep going, spend the 40 to 50,000 to finish the structural assessment and then keep going, headed to construction and rehabilitation of the entire house. That would likely keep most of the county and state grants. We actually had a timing issue on one. That county grant of 400,000 had to be spent in 2023. So we were likely going to use that. Estimating we were still probably at least $1.1 million short of the total we would need. The way this was going, keep in mind that structural assessment was not completed yet. So we expected more issues to be found because that's the way this project is going and there's no reason to assume it would get any better. So there was a high risk of increasing costs. The second option is the one where we were trying to get a little creative working with the state Office of Historic Preservation and see if we could at least keep the farmhouse, since as Drew mentioned, most of the major structural issues, grading on a curve here, were in the wings, in the Pioneer wing and on the farmhouse wing, in the kitchen wing. You know, could we keep the farmhouse and do something with that? They were open to that idea, but they had a lot of questions. They weren't sure we would be able to keep our state funding. We knew we were already going to probably lose our county funding because of the timing issue. They were also very clear that because it was put on the registry for the whole house, that by removing those wings, we would lose our historic registry status, which would probably endanger future grants. So we tried to be conservative and not count any grants we didn't have, estimating probably about 400,000 to 1.2 million short. Lower risks for more on top of that because we were dealing with the more structural issue. I did discover after we brought these 4 options forward that the deed actually says you can't add on to the house. So we maybe would have had an issue with the deed if we had tried to pursue option 2. Options 3 and 4 are kind of related, but we wanted to give the council a full idea. If we remove the house and fully develop the park space, that would be about 600,000, given costs we have with other parks to do a fully developed planned park. So we did want to estimate what that would cost. Option 4 is kind of what naturally precedes that, and that's just removing the house and having a grassy open space, which is estimated at 100,000. The Finance Personnel Committee recommended we advance options 3 and 4 to you. And so that's what led to the study session last week. Technology is just not our friend tonight. So here's the Finance Committee recommendation. As I mentioned, those are connected because you can't develop a park until you have an empty park. So how this would proceed is that option 4 would be the removal of the house, restoring the site to a grassy field, seeing if there's some amenities we can put on there quickly. And then option 3, a fully designed park, would go through the parks plan we are currently doing for our system-wide parks. And be part of that, and part of conversations in future budget processes is where to find that money and where to give that. Grants, the grants were for the rehabilitation of the house. So all the grant funding goes away with both options 3 and 4.
So tonight, if resolution 1663 goes through, the estimated timeline for demoing the Ryan House would be fall. We would put out a bid to demo the Ryan House and then salvage any materials or equipment that are in the house. And then this winter, the Ryan House would be demoed and then the site would be stabilized.
Before we ask questions, I just wanted to recap some of the feedback we've been receiving and some of the questions I've seen between emails and social media. And just go over a few things. Some of the things we're hearing, please don't tear it down, part of Sumner's history. Agreed. This was a difficult decision for the staff to process. I think for all of you, this was not an easy decision, both because of the history of the house and the fact that, a few short months ago, we thought we were going right into this very exciting project of rehabilitating it and getting it back into much more public use. So it is quite a shock to do a turn like that. That said, it's a part of Sumner's history. It is not entirely Sumner's history, so we will be committed to figuring out how to discuss and remember Sumner's history, even if we lose the house. Some other things, why did we let it reach this point? Why didn't we do more routine maintenance? It's understood the house needed some major maintenance. That's why we were doing this project. However, the issues that are really driving up the costs are structural issues, and that's something that routine maintenance doesn't fix. These were issues that were there from the way the house was built from the get-go. So routine maintenance would not have fixed those structural issues or headed off the worst of what we're facing today. We are very lucky. We knew we had some safety issues. We did not know the extent of those safety issues. So we are very thankful that while this is not perhaps the happiest outcome, no one was injured while being in that house. As Drew said, see that picture of that floor and think about how many times I walked across that myself. And now that we know the safety issues we have a responsibility to fix them as soon as possible. That is why when Drew showed the timeline, it seems quite quick, and that is because of the safety issues. Very concerning to be at Nights on Ryan and have the house fire alarms going off and having firefighters doing their thing, but running through the house, including those sections that the structural engineers told us no one should be at. Some people are asked, why didn't you get grants? We did. Why didn't we get more grants? There's really not any more out there that we could get in time to do this project. National grants, we are on the National Register, but I was about halfway through filling out the national grant when I found out the only properties that qualify have to be on the National Register at national significance, and Ryan House is on the National Register at local significance. So we did not qualify to apply for federal funds. As I went over, we did receive state funds. Those required a 2-to-1 match. So as we started losing some of the county money due to time, we would probably likely also lose the state money because it requires that 2-to-1 match. County grants had the timeline. We researched some private grants. They tended to want to fund only houses run by nonprofits, not by government. We did ask when we met with the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, did we miss anything? Are there funding sources out there we did not pursue? And they said, nope, we pretty much had exhausted the list. And we did at the very beginning of this even reach out to the PBS show This Old House and nominated this to be one of their show houses. I never heard back from them. So we even tried that. Some people are asking, why is this so expensive? Agreed, it's hard, but this is not the same as new construction. Having to do all the structural to save a historic building and go in through very carefully through these structures does take a lot more money. Plus, we are a government entity, so we are subject to prevailing wage and contracting rules, which is not the same as when you get to go hire someone to work on your house. And finally, some people, again, the change of this from we're headed into construction just a few months ago. So, you know, why not more public involvement and outreach? And there's a couple issues with this. The main thing is what's driving this is those original deeds. Those deeds are very clear about what they want and put in some caveats like you can't add on to the house, you can't build another structure that limit because the family wanted a park. And we have heard from some family members. I don't know if we'll hear from any in the public comment section, but some of the feedback we've received from the descendants of the family who gave us the space was they wanted us to respect the original deed and they were supportive of proceeding with the park. You know, the other issue is desire was not the question we needed to ask of the public. We wanted to save the house. Lots of people wanted to save the house. Funding was the issue. So it seemed disingenuous to ask the public, would you like to save it, if we knew we couldn't and didn't have the money to do that. So that's the kind of the recap of some of the feedback we've been hearing.
Thank you. Michelle, before I ask for comments, could you read the rules for commenting, for public comment?
This time is an opportunity to speak to council related to this particular agenda item. When the mayor acknowledges you, please state your name and address or the city where you reside for the record. You will have a total of 3 minutes to address the council. As a reminder, this is not a time for you and council to be entering into debate, and the mayor may direct you to staff for further comments.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, do we have any comments from the public on this matter? Go on up and state your name and address and
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Kim Foster. I live in Gig Harbor. I'm a land use attorney by trade. Go on. Sorry. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Kim Foster. I live in Gig Harbor. I'm a land use attorney by trade. But I'm not here representing anybody other than myself and my family. A lot of people would consider my family to be a heritage family in town. I have a legacy here that goes back about 100 years. My dad served as a council member and mayor of the town in the 1960s and 70s. My family owned the gas stations in town. My grandmother was a checker at the Safeway store, and I'm not talking about the one over there. I'm talking about the one on Main Street where the kitchen store is. And we're appalled, actually, that this is even being considered, given that you appear to be about $1 million short. Everyone I've talked to since I found out about this about 2 weeks ago is also shocked and outraged about this. And, you know, it's a real proud moment when somebody tells you that you're a heritage family and your name used to be on a fountain down there at a place called Heritage Park. But I'll tell you, it's an embarrassing moment for me when somebody tells me I'm a member of a heritage family when there's a Ryan in the room, because the Ryan family, that's the heritage family. I mean, the Bonnies, the Kincaids, the Ryans. I've given you a map that I pulled out because sometimes I wonder if you realize where you are. you're actually sitting, if you look at that map where it says G.H. Ryan, you're actually sitting on the G of Mr. Ryan's property. So it's kind of ironic that you're now going to vote to tear down the house of the guy whose property this very building sits on. And I mean, that should be in and of itself kind of appalling. I certainly sat in that library. I graduated from high school 50 years ago. I think there are 5 members of my class that are lawyers. We have doctors, we have teachers, we have coaches. We all sat in that library because we didn't have an internet back then. We had the World Book Encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia Britannica, a card file system about the size of this room. That was where we went to the next level. And generations of kids in this town are thankful for the Ryans for doing that. Now I'm going to put on my attorney hat just for a little bit, and I'm going to go here as quickly as I can. It's terrible that I only get 3 minutes. But for the procedure, there's been no procedure here. There's been no public process. In fact, we just heard that the public was in essence duped into thinking that the Ryan House was going to be restored until just a couple months ago. As a private developer, if I come into town and want to do something, I've got to put a giant sign out in front, not to mention a place of National Historic Registry. I've got to have a SEPA checklist. I have to have an EIS. I've got to have all kinds of process. And why hasn't there ever been a sign put out there saying we're fixing to tear this baby down? I mean, I think the public would be outraged if they knew that, and if they knew that it was going to happen over only $1 million.
Sir, your time is up.
Can I speak for just 1 second without having to get up? My name is Nancy Ryan Dressel, and I'd like to defer the rest of my time to Kim, if that's possible.
That should be all right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Nancy. Again, I'm only here to represent myself and my family. Appreciate the Ryans. But in this whole process thing, the troubling part is this house is on the National Historic Registry. There are procedures in the Code of Federal Regulations under 6015, Chapter 36, 6015. There are detailed processes that you have to go through to remove something from the National Historic Registry. And I would encourage you that at the very least, if you're going to pursue demolition of this site, you should at least back up, get the public involved, go through the proper processes of removing it from the National Historic Registry. That in and of itself involves the public. And I think that you may find that there are a lot of private dollars floating around this town. I'm not going to name these families, but I know a lot of people in this town that are extremely wealthy, and I'm sure they would be shocked as well to know that for $1 million, you're going to destroy what is the iconic feature of Sumner's history. It's the last remaining pioneer house. So I've heard again tonight that, you know, there's been some words put in the Ryan's mouth about, oh, you know, they just wanted it to be a park, or they didn't really care if we tore it down. Well, that was 100 years ago. But under your custody, the building has now become an icon. It's become a building on the National Historic Registry. When the Ryan family gave it to you 100 years ago, it might have been just an old house, but you stewarded that house and it matured into a place that's revered around town. I mean, it's the iconic place. And so this go fast, so we got to tear it down. It stood there for 150 years. The chimneys, I looked at them, they're in good shape. Why not shore it up? Why not just take the time, shore it up, make it safe, board it up, or whatever it has to be done, and then just back up a little bit and give some time to the public to understand that this is really at risk. And let the public maybe go out to the, I mean, again, I hate to name the names, but you know who they are in this town that have millions and millions and millions of dollars, and maybe they'd like to contribute to this effort as well. I think you have an opportunity here, you know. Again, I'm sometimes embarrassed when they use the term heritage family or legacy family, but at least our families have the heritage and the legacy of building something for the town, of preserving history, of preserving a sense of place that this town is. And I would certainly encourage you to be one of those families going forward, as opposed to a family that tore down our history. I appreciate the time, and I certainly encourage you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scan.
Right.
You can talk.
Anybody else?
Come on.
Mayor, we do have a handful of people online, so if you could remind them that if they would like to make comment, use the raise your hand feature or press *9.
Right. If anybody online wants to make a comment, please raise your hand or push *9 so we can get your comments. Anybody online? Seeing nobody online. Mr. Jostin.
I'm George Johnston, Sumner native, lived 16219 64th Street East. Been here for 40 years, not quite a heritage family, but really enjoy Sumner and all that the heritage families have left us. What a great place. So I've worked in the Ryan House. I grew up in a place like the Ryan House, and I work in places like the Ryan House. And there is that cost benefit thing of, is it a tear downer or is it a fixer upper? And Paul presented something that I didn't consider. And that is, they got a couple families that do care about the heritage. And I think that's what we're preserving if we preserve it, is the families that really care about Sumner and all the gifts they have given us with starting something here. I mean, that's pretty important. And I didn't consider that either. I'm of the mind that if it's beyond help, it might need to be torn down, but he's presenting a pretty good picture of, well, it could be GoFundMe to rehab the Ryan House. And Carmen's right too. It's expensive construction today and everything to make that safe enough that people can go in and enjoy it. That's the thing. Right now, you can't go in and enjoy this space at all. So there's two things at work, but I think one of the most important things is what he just presented, is that there's ways to fund this so that you could actually make it a safe and inviting place. And that's worth studying. That is. So, thank you.
All right. Anybody else in the audience? Seeing none, I will call for council comments. Councilmember Reed, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of comments here, starting with this process has been going on for about 5 or 6 years now. And like everyone else, we thought that it was moving in a positive direction. But unfortunately, with what's come to light, I had mentioned in the study session that the practical and fiscally responsible decision is for the building to come down. But from a community and historical perspective, it's a terrible decision to have to make. We've seen letters coming in from the community with wishes for the house in many directions. But one particular letter that stood out for me was one from a member of the Ryan family. It was a very heartfelt message that it recognized the history of the house and the family and the contribution to Sumner. It also restated that with the house no longer sustainable, the family restated the family's desire to, going back to 1926, is to see the property turned into a park setting that also pays honor to the history of the family and of the property. The author of the letter also volunteered to help shape what that might look like from the family's perspective moving forward. I will be sad to see the house go, but I'm excited to see what the next step will be for the property as a public space, something everyone can enjoy as the donating family intended. And I definitely want to put my great thanks out to the Ryan family and the incredible gift to the citizens.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Carmen and Ms. McCarty for what they presented to us and for the long hours that they put into this project. A lot has been said about the National Registry. And I've moved into Sumner 21 years ago, and I live in a home that is on the National Register of Historic Places. And I wondered what that meant. And I did a little research, and the White House of the United States of America is also on that register. And a former First Lady said in an interview some time ago that what that means to her is that she gets a chance, now it's her turn, to take care of that place. Now, my comments are not meant to be critical of anybody, certainly not the people that are trying to restore this house or have figured out that it needs extra work. No blame is intended. As was pointed out, routine maintenance could not solve the problems that a house built in the mid 1800s that would happen to it over time. Repairs, as I've seen, as I've toured the house and seen the slides, it's beyond my imagination. I just can't see how structurally that it got this way. I know there weren't building standards and stuff at the time it was built, and that may be part of it. A lot of work has been put into finding grant funds to help pay for this. And as Councilmember Reed pointed out, that the actual deed, turning it over to the city, I'm going to read part of it just quickly. The said premises being hereby granted, conveyed, and dedicated to the town of Sumner for the use of the public forever as and for a public park and site for a public library to be maintained on said premises. So in my mind, doing what is the right thing financially, the burden, we are keeping the terms of that deed completely. We would look to also, I would encourage staff to, if this resolution goes through, figuring out a way that we can honor the history of the Ryan family and what they've done to benefit the city of Sumner. But I appreciate the comments made. It is very difficult to think about tearing down a piece of history, but I feel that we can accomplish much more by doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any other comments from Councilmember Potato?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult decision for all of us, and I have been in the finance committee meetings, and initially I thought, yes, we can save it. But once they started opening up the walls and seeing what the structure was, and then especially seeing how the ceiling, there's no, it's not hooked into the joists at all. So, I mean, the more we learned, then it became more evident that it would be better to have it as a park and to be open to the public, because that's what the family, intended it to be. We, if we could, it would be nice to have another structure, but that's not allowed in the deed. So I know it's not a popular decision for the public, but I cannot support, trying to put more money into the house.
Anybody else? Mr. Brown?
I want to have more time to find the money to that I'm not tearing it down right now. In the more time for more moolah.
Anybody else? You guys, are you good? Are you going, Sean? Go ahead.
This is really a heartbreaking decision. We were so hopeful with the beginning, assessments. We had all kinds of dreams and good pictures and ideas and things. And it's just so disappointing that, that reality had to set in when we had people really, really look, when they were looking with things, with the house full, they had a different view of the home than when they did and were able to get to the real structure and things. So, and Ms. Palmer got so many grants. We really thought we were going to be able to do a nice job of this project, but as our lover of old houses, it's especially hard for me, but sometimes you just have to accept reality. And as a good steward of our citizens' money, I just can't vote not to do it when we would be just throwing money, our citizens' money away to things that I just didn't think would ever live up to the possibility of being able to do. It would be what you call a money pit. People would be beginning to get very unhappy with the amount of money that just had to be being put towards it. I mean, we can say it might be $1 million something now, but if anybody who's ever owned an old house or remodeled an old house, that always grows. And up to 4 o'clock today, I was working with staff, continuing to make sure that all angles had been explored and that we had tried to think and brainstorm and go from every different direction because nobody wants to see this happen. But I just think it has just become almost what I'll call an attractive nuisance in the fact that it's unsafe. And we have people who want to break into it all the time. We can't allow people to go in there and do anything. So I think I'm probably going to have to vote for it, even though it's just totally against my grain, but there just doesn't seem to be any way around it.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Newman,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Brown,
No.
Potato,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Hochstetter.
Yes.
Passes 6-1. Okay. So we are moving on to reports. Carla, do you have a report tonight? Council report. Up to you, girl.
I'll wait until next week. Thanks.
Okay. Chicken. All right. Councilmember Cole,
No report tonight.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Nothing.
Mr. Reed?
Mr. Reed,
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart,
Nothing tonight, thank you.
City Administrator Jason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Next week at our study session, Mr. Windisch will be giving a presentation on affordable housing and the city's efforts to comply with the state legislation, as well as just an overview of what is considered affordable housing and the new commerce guidance on how we have to plan for different levels of affordability in our planning efforts. As far as the commissions go, a couple things of note. The Planning Commission is continuing to work through the 2024 comprehensive plan update. They are meeting several times between now and the end of the year to review proposed changes. Encourage you to monitor the website, and you can see all the comprehensive plan changes that they're considering. And there will be several public hearings throughout the comp plan process. The Design Commission has a meeting this Wednesday at 6:30 to review the Sound Transit Garage and should be making a final recommendation that evening. On the personnel front, I wanted to let council know that Sergeant Curley has announced his retirement effective at the end of this month. Matt has worked for the city for about 30 years now and was always seen at various community events. And also he coached the South Sound Titans alternative baseball team. And we wish him well in retirement. And the city is currently working through an internal promotional process for sergeant. Also, Public Works Director Mike Dahlem announced his retirement effective in January of 2024. Mike has worked for the city since 2000, and it's been the Public Works Director since 2016. Through Mike's vision and resourcefulness, several transportation and environmental projects have been completed or are currently in the works. Effective today, the mayor has promoted Michael Kosa as the interim Public Works Director. Michael's in the audience tonight. This interim appointment allows Mike to focus on winding down several of his larger projects while transferring the day-to-day leadership to Michael. And lastly, just a reminder, we do have our fall open house next Tuesday, so a week from tomorrow, September 26th, from 5 to 7 p.m. here at City Hall. Staff will be available to answer questions on the significant projects going on in the city. And if you can't join us in person that day, encourage the public to look at our Sumner Connects page, which has updated information on all of our projects going on, or all the significant projects rather going on in the city. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, you're off the hook. Mine will be happy. Today we had a ribbon cutting for our new Werner, how do you say that? Woonerf's project over on Cherry and Kincaid. And it turned out real well. It didn't rain and there was quite a few people there. And I would like to thank Pierce County and also for giving us money and helping with that project and county and Sound Transit. I always want to say Pierce Transit, Sound Transit for helping with that funding. It's really a nice part. It started out as a utility, fixing utilities and ended up a beautiful area right in the middle of our downtown. So we're really happy with that. With all that, I think we are adjourned at